These US intellectuals, or sages as they call them, exposed night after night in their own living rooms to the mindset and views of the Arabs, and being exposed to what the US and Israel are doing in Palestine. I think fairly obviously the US intellectuals, or sages, will become hugely more sympathetic towards the Arab viewpoint and be a lot better informed about what happened and about America's role in this massive injustice. Hopefully they will be ashamed and become motivated to change the situation. What will happen when the Arab nations get global television, some of it dubbed into good Arabic? Very probably over time the Arabs will secularize the way the Europeans have done. They will become increasingly cynical of their traditional religious beliefs as they listen to Western philosophers and social scientists explain the origins of religions. For example, that humanity has invented more than 100,000 different gods over the broad sweep of history over the planet. That most of them are now dead gods, no longer worshipped. That the gods of New Guinea tribesmen have lots of pigs, that the gods of the ancient Chinese have slitty eyes, etc. They will see that religions are human-invented fictions that offer psychological crutches to people gullible enough to believe them, but don't make any sense in terms of modern scientific knowledge and do not hold up to critical analysis. The Arabs, and the Americans too for that matter, will then be more able to throw off their religious beliefs, just like the Europeans, and learn to think critically, to question, to research, and to become modern, like the advanced countries. The Arabs were once sophisticated and advanced. Go see the famous Moorish water garden palace of Alhambra in Granada, Spain, to see Arab culture at its most magnificent and beautiful, and compare it with the brutishness of the European castle built nearby at about the same time. The contrast is striking. There's a well-known saying in Europe that the Arabs would be better off learning chemistry than the Quran, meaning that if the Arabs want to get rich by being scientifically and technologically competent, they will have to overcome the religious beliefs that foster slavish, unquestioning obedience to medieval values, and instead foster scientific curiosity and critical thinking. It's sad to think how low the Arabs have fallen in terms of world prestige. In this regard, the views of the Japanese relative to the Arabs are interesting. The Japanese are so homogeneous that there are effectively no minority groups to be offended by Japanese opinions of other peoples, so the Japanese speak freely amongst themselves about what they think of other cultures. They tend to rank peoples in terms of how much they admire them. They put themselves at the top, then the US, then Germany, France, England, and at second bottom the Arabs, and at the very bottom black Africans. One could make a similar remark about the Chinese. It's shameful how far behind the Western countries China has fallen in the last few centuries. The Chinese are scrambling like mad to catch up with the West now, but remain so incredibly poor in the western part of the country. Such remarks and opinions may be very difficult to swallow and cause a lot of pain to those peoples who are woken from their monocultured slumber by the realities presented to them by the cold-eyed opinions of other cultures on the world media. Absorbing the lessons to be learned from a global media will not always be positive. It's likely that for many cultures a lot of ego-bruising trauma will be felt. Negative truths are the hardest to swallow. If the majority of the cultures of the global media tend to say the same negative things about a particular culture, then the collective wisdom and experience of those many cultures will probably be valid. The people of the culture concerned will intuitively feel this and be moved by it, painful though it may be. In some cases, it may be devastating. Perhaps a reaction will set in to counter the growing collective inferiority complex generated by too much negative reality. This is possible, but when millions of people get exposed to the negative truths they're seen by most of the other cultures, then the culture devastated will be forced to adjust, to reform, to upgrade, and clean up its act. Removing cultural differences will take time and energy, and will not be an easy thing to do. Bridging the gaps between today's huge cultural divides will take years of exposure to the global media before real social engineering can take effect. In the case of the differences between the US and China, relations between the two countries will get a lot easier once China becomes a democracy. With Americans seeing Chinese media and Chinese seeing American media, both peoples will understand each other much better and hence sympathize with each other's views more readily. A similar story will hold between the Americans and the Arabs. Once the Arabs see how far behind they are relative to the richer countries and become aware to what extent their traditional beliefs are holding them back, then they will be more motivated to change, to modernize, to secularize, to learn science, to develop their education systems, etc. As Americans lose their suffocating insularity and become much more aware, due to the world media, of their role in the massive injustice they have committed against the Palestinians, and then create a more balanced support of both Palestinians and Jews in the Middle East, then the Arab countries will be more respectful of the US instead of hating the country. Relations between the Arab countries and the US should then get a lot better. In short, the role of Glow media in the future in reducing intercultural differences in attitudes will be of critical importance. I'm running out of memory, I'll stop here. Ciao.